Good evening once again, everyone. I'm very thankful that you all could join me. We left off in Genesis 44 with Judah pleading, begging this Egyptian ruler who had been very awkward to them. They didn't understand where he was coming from. He was treating them very well, and then all of a sudden certain things would happen, and they would say, well, God's punishing us. And then Zephanath Paneath, Joseph, is now about to put Benjamin into slavery as he was. And we see Judah, the main conspirator behind putting Joseph into slavery 22 years before this. We see him begging for the life of Benjamin. Genesis 45 picks up like this. Very, very good chapter. Then Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him. And he cried, meaning he yelled, cause every man to go out from me. And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brethren. There's just one or two things I'd like to say about this. Whenever it says cried in the Bible, that usually means cried out. Whenever they're crying, literally, it'll say weeping or wept. After Judah's speech, one of the most lovely speeches that you could ever hear, Joseph made himself known unto his brethren. How he made himself known, we don't know, but more than likely he was wearing a headdress, like in the movie. But he could have also had scars or birthmarks. He could have had tails, certain bodily whatever, that he could have shown them in order to prove that. But he may not have had to. He may have just had said, I'm Joseph. And he wept aloud. And the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. He says, I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him. They were literally in shock. This would have been a very staggering thing. Here is a picture of me as a young fella, about Joseph's age, 18 years old, had pimples all over my face, very timid, just like a kid. And here's me at 32. I'm 36 now, but here's me preaching at 32. Mind you, this is only 14 years. Only 14 years. Joseph, he was separated from his family for 22 years at this point. 22 years. Quite different people in very, very major ways. You have to remember, whenever they first seen Joseph, Joseph was just a happy-go-lucky kid, had never went through very much in life. And then all of a sudden, he goes through a lot in a relatively short period of time. And he becomes king and a ruler over the most powerful land in the entire world. And he's running the world, basically. So you can imagine the growth that has happened to this man. See, in this picture right here, 18 years old, in that one, I didn't know anything. Now, as you can see, I'm very, oh yeah, don't bother me, and I'm very gothic looking almost. But right here, you're just a different person. You're a different person altogether. You act different, you talk different, you carry yourself different, you relate to different people differently. You're just not the same kind of person as you was at 18, 17, 18. And so it would have been incredibly difficult to recognize Joseph. Imagine Joseph at this time is about 39 years old. So you have to add about 7 years on to where I'm at in this picture. You have to add 3 to where I'm at right now in order to fully grasp just how much of maturity that can come upon a man. You can only imagine what these brothers were thinking. How much that they had always treated him badly. I can picture him right now in the camp, him 15, 16 years old, and them just, every time he come around, them kind of getting real quiet. And maybe one of the reasons why Jacob kept Joseph away from his brothers so often was because they were so mean to him. And I bet they treated him very, very harshly. Now, this man right here, they're terrified of. They weren't terrified a bit of Joseph. They wanted to kill him, sold him into slavery. They weren't terrified a bit of this young boy. This man right here, he has shook them to the core. This is a completely different man. Kind of reminds me of how the world treated Jesus. Yeah, he allowed them to crucify him and to beat him and plucked his beard, like hairs from his beard, and to punch him in the face. He allowed all this. And he also allowed them, they tried to throw him off a cliff once, and they picked up stones against him. They railed against him all the time, and he allowed it. Man, what a sight whenever they see him here, and just very soon. Oh, the terror. Just like these men, the terror of seeing him now. And Joseph said unto his brethren, Come near to me, I pray you. And they came near, and he said, I am Joseph your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt. This is quite a bit said right here in just these one simple words. Come near to me, I pray you. He's meaning, here, you can get closer. It's fine. He's saying, I beg you, just come out and close. They were so terrified and in shock that they didn't move. They didn't speak. They didn't move. They did nothing. They just waited. What's his move? Because it's all in his court. And he has to actually tell these terrified men, come near to me. It's okay. It's okay. It's just like in Revelation, how Jesus is completely glorified. And in the very first chapter, he appears unto John, his face like the sun, his voice like many waters, his eyes like fire. Terrifying image. And John faints, literally falls like a dead man. He just collapses before him. And then Jesus comes up to him and he says, Fear not. He says, I am the first and the last, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. And he says, don't worry, it's fine. Man, what a loving God. For all that I've done to him, I deserve so many horrible things upon me. Notice also, he says, I am Joseph, your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt. See, he has to keep reiterating to him, I'm that Joseph. I'm him. And he's also calling out the elephant in the room. He says, whom ye sold into Egypt. He says, I'm well aware you all sold me into Egypt. He said, don't think that there's any ulterior motive here. Don't think that I'm planning anything against you. He's bringing the most obvious thing that they're worried about out into the open. And he says, now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves, that ye sold me hither, for God did send me before you to preserve life. I really like David Guzik's quote on this. David Guzik of Enduring Word Ministry, he said, it is fair to ask, why was Joseph in Egypt? Was it because of the sin of his brothers, or because of the good plan of God? The answer is that both aspects were true. And the old theologian, Charles Spurgeon, and mind you, I'm not a Calvinist. And I tell people all the time, I'm not an Arminianist either. I'm not in the Arminian camp either. I think that both sides go too far. I'm right in the middle. I believe in free will and predestination. I believe that God sets certain things in order and that he allows us to live our lives. Charles Spurgeon said, how wonderfully those two things meet in practical harmony, the free will of man and the predestination of God. Man acts just as freely and just as guiltily as if there were no predestination whatsoever, and God ordains, arranges, supervises, and overrules just as accurately as if there were no free will in the universe. So, Spurgeon believes in both free will and fate. Right here, I'm going to show a snippet from the movie dealing with this one occasion. I think it's very moving.
Why did you do such a wicked thing?
Master, we have done nothing.
Then how do you explain it?
God is punishing us for a crime we committed many years ago. It seems he wants us all to taste the bitterness of slavery. For surely we are all your slaves now.
I am not a vindictive man. You can return to your father. I shall keep only Benjamin.
No!
You dare raise your voice to me? Men can die for less.
1,000 pardons, Master. But the very idea is unthinkable. Master, I cannot pretend to grasp the meaning of these strange happenings. Benjamin has never stolen in his life. Never.
Never, Master.
And he's too clever to take a cherished and unique object from a man as powerful as you. Nor do I know how the money got into our sacks on our previous trip. Perhaps it was all the work of God.
Master, please, spare the life of Benjamin, beloved son of our father's old age. Losing Benjamin would kill our old father, whom we have already wounded deeply.
Take me as a slave in place of Benjamin and allow the boy to go home to his father.
No. Benjamin will stay with me.
I'm sorry, Master. We must take the boy back to our father.
Or die in the attempt.
You would rather die 1,000 times than see such pain in our father's eyes again!
And live another 20 years of wretched cowardice. No, Master!
So you are now ready to sacrifice your lives for one of your brothers? Yes. Why then did you not do the same for the other one? The one you said died when in truth you yourselves sold him into slavery.
You know about Joseph? How?
Because he's alive.
Alive?
He's here in this
Alive?
palace. In fact, he's in this room. Leave us. I said leave us. Get out!
Sarge! Come!
I am Joseph.
Joseph. It is my brother Joseph.
Yes, it is I. But be at peace. Come closer. Don't be afraid, I will not harm you. Am I to take the place of God?
Joseph.
It is not for me to punish you. You meant evil against me, yes. But God meant it for good. To bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So fear not. I shall provide for you and for your families. And especially for our father.
I am most to blame. I deserve to be enslaved.
No. My brother. I shall not kill you. That is not the lesson the Lord, blessed be his name, has put before us. Perhaps we have learned the meaning of brotherhood, of family, and that wherever we may go, no matter how God's plan separates us, we must always be true to one another. To be family. You must return for our father. Tell him of what I have achieved and move him here with all your belongings. I want you near me in the land of Goshen so I may provide for you during the remaining years of the famine. I have spoken to the Pharaoh. All is prepared. Come to me. Come to me. I'm your brother. I am Joseph. Blessed be his name.
Blessed be his name.
Now, obviously, they did take a few liberties with that scene, but for the most part, it does, I believe, kind of get it right, the emotion involved with this. Picking up on verse 6, for these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in thee which there shall neither be earing nor harvest. Just a little quick note on that. Imagine how shocking it would have been to have heard this is going to go on for 5 more years. Notice the timing also, how they show up 1 year in, and then they get some grain, then they run out. Just a few months later, about a year later, they run out. So they're only 2 years into this famine, and they're already talking about dying. That is just how difficult that this famine was on the entire world. And so hearing this is bigger than hearing about winning the lottery. This is actually saving your life, your children's lives, your father and mother's life, your family's life, your herd's life, your treasures, this is huge, huge what they're being told. And God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. I told my parents the other day about this one verse and how this one verse in the Old Testament summarizes up what Christ, this is like the John 3:16 of the Old Testament. And God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. That just sounds so much like what Christ is doing for us. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. I do believe that Joseph is truly meaning what he says right here, but I also think that he's trying to, I've done this with a lot of my buddies, and if they ever do me wrong or something, how I'll try to say, no man, it was this, it wasn't totally you, we always do this, how we try to ease their pain, ease their burden by telling them, trying to lift their transgressions off just a little bit so that they don't feel so terrible about it. I do believe that's a little bit of why Joseph's saying that, but I also think that he does mean it, and I also believe it's true. Haste ye and go up to my father, and say unto him, thus saith thy son Joseph, God hath met, man, you imagine hearing that. Thus saith thy son Joseph, God hath made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down unto me, and tarry not. I love this. This just sounds like the rapture, This sounds like something that would be spoken of in heaven. Go get everybody, tarry not, go get them, bring them on up here. Hurry up. It's time. I don't know, there's something that moves me about that verse. And thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen, and thou shalt be near unto me, thou and thy children, and thy children's children, and thy flocks, and thy herds, and all that thou hast. And there will I nourish thee, for yet there are 5 years of famine, lest thou and thy household and all that thou hast come to poverty. And behold, your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that it is my mouth that speaketh unto you. I bet you anything, they were still in shock. That reminds me of what's written in Zechariah 12. And I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplications, and they shall look upon me whom they have pierced. Now notice, I love this verse. And they shall look upon me, this is God speaking, and they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him. First person and third person. Trinity. As one mourneth for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him, as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. We'll get to the Passover night of Egypt here pretty soon in Exodus. But it's very, very important to notice how the Lord kills all the firstborn on Passover night. And his firstborn's blood being applied to the doors of people, death passes over them, and God spares them from death. See, he already shed his blood, his firstborn's blood, the first begotten of God, the only begotten of God. He shed his blood before the foundation of the earth, before the whole world, before the whole universe, shed his blood already. Apply his blood to our doorposts, death passes from us. Very, very beautiful. Very, very. But just as there's, and they shall look upon me in whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him, it's the exact same way that the brothers are looking at Joseph, the brother in whom they wronged. They're going to look at Christ and be shocked. Absolutely shocked. It staggers me how Jews today can read this 100 times over. They're so much smarter than me and everyone else, and they can't grasp this. Further evidence that it takes God in order to understand God's word. And ye shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt, and of all that ye have seen, and ye shall haste and bring down my father hither. And he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. Moreover, he kissed all his brethren, and wept upon them, and after that his brethren talked with him. Oh, that conversation. Imagine that, after you finally, the great reveal, and then the shock is settling in, and the reality of the situation settled. Suddenly you get to talk. You get past all the tears, finally, and all the embracing, and then you just sit down and talk. Man, what a conversation. Me personally, I thought about this before doing the presentation. I was thinking to myself, I wonder what I'd say. Jokingly, I would jab at them just a little bit. I would be like, it was very cold in that pit. And I remember whatever you put me down there. All jokes, completely all jokes, kind of to relax the situation, to put them at ease. Like, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, nah, man, I was just a little young. Man, what a conversation. What a conversation this would have been. To have been a fly on the wall would have been amazing. And the fame thereof was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brethren are come. And it pleased Pharaoh well, and his servants. Notice they say Joseph's brethren are come. They don't say Zephanath-Paneah's brothers are come. I bet you anything, they kept calling him his rightful name. I would say that everybody in Pharaoh's house still referred to him as Joseph, but all of Egypt knew him as Zephanath-Paneah. So this is just a family thing, it seems like. Seems like he's got his other little family on over here, and it pleased Pharaoh. Pharaoh was well pleased with hearing this. I think that they were buddies. I think they were like kind of best friends almost. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, Say unto thy brethren, this do ye, lade your beast, and go, get you into the land of Canaan, and take your father and your households, and come unto me, and I will give you the good of the land of Egypt, and ye shall eat the fat of the land. Now thou art commanded, this do ye, take you wagons out of the land of Egypt for your little ones and for your wives, and bring your father, and come. Also regard not your stuff, for the good of all the land of Egypt is yours. He says, don't worry about your stuff. Leave your stuff here. He says, this is now your new home for a few centuries. Because remember what God told Abraham. He says, the iniquity of the Amorites is not full yet. So the land of Canaan, though it was promised to them, it is not given to them right now. Okay? And by the way, people in the land of Canaan at this point they're starving to death. They're suffering. So Egypt being their home at this time was a glorious thing because of who ruled it. Because Joseph truly ruled it, and God ruled Joseph. So this was where God desired them to be. And the children of Israel did so, and Joseph gave them wagons according to the commandment of Pharaoh, and gave them provision for the way. To all of them he gave each man changes of raiment, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of raiment. It's like, here you go, little brother. Imagine Benjamin was going up there terrified. He was probably overheard his older brothers talking about, what are they going to do? They're going to probably get us all on in here with Benjamin because they all think that we're all spies and they're going to put us in prison. But imagine now Benjamin is coming back rich. His whole family's good to go. His brother is alive. What glory, man, what glory. And to his father he sent after this manner 10 asses laden with the good things of Egypt, and 10 she-asses laden with corn and bread and meat for his father by the way. So he sent his brethren away, and they departed, and he said unto them, see that you fall not out by the way. He's basically telling them right here, see that you fall not out by the way. He's saying the same thing that Jesus tells us. He says, let not your hearts be troubled. He says, don't get any wild ideas or thoughts, because it's very easy to be at ease around Joseph. But whenever they leave Joseph, they don't know, that they probably are still very, very confused with the situation. This is all hitting them all at once. Complete change of lifestyle. And they remember how they did Joseph. But Joseph is basically telling them, don't start to think different thoughts. Don't be negative. Don't be selfish, thinking that now you're rich and all this. He says, stay humble. Do not fall out by the way. And they went up out of Egypt and came into the land of Canaan unto Jacob their father. You talk about a Christmas present for Jacob. Jacob thinks, yes, they're bringing some corn back. We can finally eat. We can feed some flocks. The women will hush and everything will be good. He has no idea what kind of good news is about to hit him. And this is Jacob. This is the very, very depressed Jacob. And notice, it's, speaking of Jacob. We're about to see Israel mentioned right here in just a second. And they told him, the brethren told Jacob, Joseph is yet alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart fainted, for he believed them not. It's amazing how often we'll believe bad news over good news. Whenever they first returned without Joseph 22 years before this, they told him Jacob was dead. They found his coat of many colors and such covered in blood, and he immediately believed them. But whenever they're telling him he's alive and he's governor over all the land of Egypt, and he's telling them to come on over there, he faints because he can't believe it. It's so unbelievable, for he believed them not. And they told him all the words of Joseph, which he had said unto them. And when he saw the wagons which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob, their father, revived. This reminds me of doubting Thomas. He said, I will not believe Christ is risen until I put my fingers in the holes of his hands and such. And it so reminds me of that. He says, not until I see it. And there's a lot of Christians like this. There's a lot of Christians that, yeah, I believe it, but they lack that faith where I know for a fact it's about to come. And so a lot of them say, well, let me see it. They have that little bit of doubt, but whenever they saw the wagons which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob, their father, revived. There was a revival that happened whenever he sent. And the chapter ends like this. And Israel, once that revival happened, and Israel said, it is enough. Joseph, my son, is yet alive. I will go and see him before I die. Now remember, just a couple of chapters before this, all of these things are against me. The whole world's against me. Jacob was saying, all the world has turned on me. There's no good that'll come to me. But Israel, once he's revived, he says, it is enough. He says, it is all good. Everything's good. That's what he's meaning. How lovely of a chapter. Am I right? How absolutely beautiful of a chapter. One of the best chapters that's ever been written, I believe. And there's an awful lot to learn about this. I'm so thankful that this all ended on a very good note. And as we come to the closing of Genesis in our studies, let's keep in mind that it always, for the God-fearing man, will be good in the end. Not just good, but glorious. Until next time, Lord of peace be with you all. Amen.